share the member's concerns in that regard.
We now move to First Minister's questions. Question number 1, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And for the last time in 2012, may I ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day?
First Minister.
Well, I'm delighted to announce I'll be speaking to the Energy Minister, Fergus Ewing, who's at NIG, to announce that the Scottish company Global Energy is increasing its workforce by 50% in the NIG Energy Park, 400 new jobs. The applications for these jobs will start today, which makes it fantastic news for the reindustrialisation of the Cromarty and a great Christmas present for the Highlands of Scotland.
Joanne Lamont. And we on this side always welcome good news in relation to the opportunities for people to work.
Order.
Over the last year, the First Minister has told us he had legal advice on the EU when he hadn't, that college funding was going up when he was cutting it, and that we would have a seat in the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England when he hadn't even spoken to them. Which one of these answers was the most exact ever given to any Parliament anywhere?
Well,
First Minister.
you know, that's a bundle of laughs at Christmas, isn't it? You know, the ancient Mayan civilization predict the end of the world tomorrow. Joanne Lamont comes here and predicts it every single week.
Joanne Lamont. Order.
You've obviously not been attending the same First Minister's questions as I have for the last year. Because I am, of course, rather an optimist. That at some point the First Minister might actually reflect on the gap between what he says and what he does. However, I think we can all agree this has been a tough year for everyone. Money has been tight almost everywhere. Some of us might ask, what could we do with £500,000? Maybe 60 nurses or 14 teachers. But in Alex Salmon's world, £500,000 gets you 5 days watching golf in Chicago. What was the First Minister's preferred foreign investment opportunity visit of the year? His £500,000 trip to the Ryder Cup or his trip to the pictures in California?
First Minister.
Well, promoting Scotland is of huge importance. There were, if I remember correctly,
Order.
3 direct jobs announcements as a result of the Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Government mission to Chicago. I know that Joanne Lamont, because she's just told us, welcomes all of these new jobs for Scotland. And I think that it's worth reflecting that something we should be cheered about at Christmas is that the Ernst & Young survey once again shows that Scotland is the top location for inward investment in these islands. Given that we even exceeded London this year, I think we must be doing something right in terms of promotion of Scotland abroad. So perhaps in that spirit of Christmas and unity, which I know that Joanne Lamont is aspiring to, perhaps she'll welcome, if not the success of the government, then let's welcome the success of Scottish Enterprise and Scottish Development International in bringing these valuable new jobs to Scotland.
I'm not sure that First Minister's £500,000 trip to the Ryder Cup was what brought these jobs to Scotland. And if we were concerned about bringing jobs, perhaps we wouldn't be attacking the very colleges which create the skills, they afford the opportunities for people as well. But of course, the First Minister has moved this year, and I'm not talking about his proposed flick from Bute House to St Andrews Tower. When David Cameron called for talks on the referendum, we may recall the First Minister said it was an extraordinary attempt to bully and intimidate Scotland. Then he signed the timetable and said it was an historic moment. Can I ask the First Minister, who has been his favourite visitor to Edinburgh this year? David Cameron or Rupert Murdoch coming round for a turn at his tea cake? Or does he now regret not getting the Dalai Lama round for a caramel wafer?
First Minister.
I think what would be a fundamental attack on Scotland's colleges is imposing tuition fees on the 26,000 students in our colleges who currently don't pay tuition fees. I think it was unwise of Joanne Lamont to cite David Cameron. I've been looking at Prime Minister's questions from yesterday. David Cameron to Ed Miliband. He attacks him for having the same old something-for-nothing culture that got us into this press in the first place, directly reflecting on the something-for-nothing speech of Joanne Lamont. 1 year in office as the Labour Party leader in Scotland, and she reaches the ultimate accolade. She's quoted by the Tory Prime Minister in support in the House of Commons. What a disgrace.
Joanne Lamont.
Of course, the First Minister's problem is that John Swinney wanted to have that debate. That is why he asked Campbell Christie to commission a report, and that report said we need to deal with competing demands. And the reality is the price that the First Minister denied of his education choices is cuts in college places and our schools with a growing gap between the rich and the poor. He knows that, and perhaps in New Year he might want to confront the reality of it. However, we are now in the Christmas spirit.
Mr. Swinney.
No, it doesn't need to be written down because it's in my very heart. It's in my very heart, First Minister, because we are, of course, reaching Christmas. And after such a historic year of success in terms of the debate, presumably the First Minister will want to hand out Christmas presents to a successful team. Perhaps a congratulatory abacus and spell checker for Mike Russell. A talking doll for John Swinney so he can learn what dialogue actually means. Or even a shovel for Nicola Sturgeon so she's always shovel ready to clean up the First Minister's next bit of mess. But may I wish everyone in the chamber and everyone in the country a happy Christmas and a peaceful and more prosperous New Year. And in the First Minister's case, may I wish him as good a year next year as he's had this one.
First Minister, order.
I noticed that
Order.
Joanne Lamont becomes cheerful and in the Christmas spirit when she moves away from Paul Sinclair's script and speaks from the heart. And I advise much more of that over the next year. But let's celebrate something else today. Let's celebrate the UCAS figures released, showing a 1% increase in students going to Scottish universities, compared to the 26,000 decline in English students going to English universities. And we consider where both the college and the university funding position in Scotland is hugely greater than it is south of the border. What part of the argument for imposing tuition fees on university students, on 26,000 college students, is actually going to increase the numbers of students going to university? Can we not look at the catastrophe south of the border and hope that all parties will maintain the commitment that they made in this chamber by a huge majority to not have up-front or back-end tuition fees in Scotland? And just to check that in this Christmas spirit, my memory wasn't playing tricks, I consulted the Scottish Labour website this very day, and I would advise you to consult it quickly because it might be down by Christmas. Here it says, a picture of Joanne Lamont: no up-front or back-end tuition fees for Scottish on the website. In the web, there's pictures of Jenny Mara, there's pictures of Lewis MacDonald and Richard Baker all signing the pledge against tuition fees. They bear a remarkable resemblance to the pledge that Nick Clegg signed before his party nosedived. So let's hope, as we approach the coming year, that Joanne Lamont won't relish the fact she's cited by David Cameron in the new Tory-Labour alliance in Scotland. They shall actually return to the roots, not just of the Labour Party and the SNP, but the Scottish tradition of free education. And we can say with confidence to the students of Scotland that not just next year, but for all time, that free education will be part of the Scottish tradition and pave a future for the people of Scotland, not just for Christmas, but for all time.
Question number 2, Ruth Davidson.
Presiding Officer, and may I wish you and indeed the whole Chamber all the compliments of the season and ask the First Minister when he'll next meet the Secretary of State for Scotland.
First Minister.
I reciprocate. No plans. Secretary of State near future.
Ruth Davidson.
The First Minister didn't appear to like the pantomime routine. I think it's just as well that the gallery weren't charged. So let's play this one straight, shall we? Yesterday, the Finance Secretary pledged to spend £205 million of the money he received from the Chancellor's autumn statement to start what he called a building boom in Scotland. But last year, the Finance Secretary pledged to spend up to £350 million this financial year through the MPD Building Fund for schools and hospitals. Can I ask the First Minister how much of that will actually have been spent by the end of this financial year?
Well, I point out the non-profit distribution system is such a success that it's being intended to be copied at Westminster by a Chancellor who now declares, in his words, that the PFI has been discredited. So, in the spirit of Christmas, can I congratulate the Conservative Party on their realisation that the private finance initiative has now been totally discredited, and I hope that their new allies in the Labour Party will soon join the consensus and seeing the sense in non-profit distribution and the nonsense in PFI.
Ruth Davidson.
Well, as the First Minister should know, NPD is such a success that of the £350 million pledged, according to Spice, the princely sum of £20 million will be spent. That's £330 million less than the Finance Secretary pledged and has available. And that's on top of the year before, when he pledged up to £150 million, but spent nothing. £0 and 0 pence. So that is up to £480 million promised to build schools and hospitals and never delivered. So if yesterday's £205 million can be heralded as a building boom, securing 2,000 jobs, surely by the government's own figures, £480 million would have been a building bonanza, securing nearly 5,000 jobs. Millions of pounds promised to help the construction industry, but next to nothing is being built. That's why it's so important that yesterday's announcement is not just more seasonal spin. Scotland cannot afford to wait for these shovel-ready projects to be cynically delayed until just before the 2014 referendum. So, will the First Minister tell us what the Finance Secretary refused to confirm yesterday? In which months in 2013 will these £205 million worth of projects start? And when will the unspent £480 million previously promised actually be released?
First Minister.
The years in planning of the capital spending, can I point out to Ruth Davidson that if the Conservative Party hadn't cut the capital budget, even under revisions, by 26%, then these funds could have been spent directly over the last 2 years. In terms of non-profit distribution, can I draw our attention to the most significant non-profit distribution project in Scotland, which explains, incidentally, a question, the Aberdeen peripheral route. Now, I think the Chamber will agree that it is not the responsibility of the Government that the Aberdeen peripheral route was taken through the Scottish courts right the way to the Supreme Court. Should the Government, therefore, have battled their way through to get into a position where that route can go ahead and the NPD allocated for it can go ahead in that time? Or should we, according to Ruth Davidson, have spent the money on something else and therefore not be able to go ahead with the peripheral route now? Now, I say this point seriously to Ruth Davidson because, folk across the north east of Scotland are celebrating that at last the shovels are in the ground in the north east of Scotland. If we left it to Ruth Davidson, the money to build the peripheral route wouldn't be there because she would have spent it in something else that she hasn't defined. And if we'd left it to the Tory party, or if they'd listened to John Swinney 2 years ago, then the projects that are in line for this financial year, next financial year and the year after could already have been spent in Scotland. And in terms of finance and public finance, I see that the Morning Star and the Daily Telegraph... All right, I'll put it the other way around. The Daily Telegraph and the Morning Star were united in agreeing with the RMT union this week, saying that the waste in terms of the West Coast route and the abortive, abandoned bidding process would amount to perhaps £100 million. Perhaps the Conservative Party and Ruth Davis would like to reflect, in the spirit of Christmas, what that £100 million potentially wasted by Tory ministers could have done if it had been invested in the economy. And do not, at any time in 2013, come across to this chamber, the party of Omni Shambles, and start talking to this government about economic confidence.
We have a number of constituency questions. Alec Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wonder if the First Minister is aware that the company Swift Horseman Limited, a high-quality joinery provider, has gone into receivership just 2 days ago, resulting in 40 redundancies in the town of Dalbeattie in my constituency. Now, coming on top of 12 redundancies at BSW Timber in the same town, this loss of 52 jobs is certainly not a welcome Christmas present to that rural community where alternative employment is far from plentiful. So can I ask the First Minister what his government will do to ensure that all available support and advice is given to the affected employees, particularly at this time of year, and also what assistance it can and will give to the receivers, PricewaterhouseCoopers, in searching for a buyer for Swift Horseman's now empty premises?
First Minister.
Yeah, can I thank Alec Ferguson for the question. As he knows, the Swift Horseman Group has gone into receivership, which puts at risk many jobs across the UK, including 40 to 50 in his constituency, in his area of Scotland. As soon as the Partnership for Continuing Employment became aware of the situation, they have already contacted the administrators to offer support. I understand that representatives from the local PACE team are visiting the site this morning to speak to individuals and identify what support will be needed. It's a very difficult position at any time of year, but particularly at this time of year. But I know that Alec Ferguson is well aware of the substantial success that the PACE team have had in redeploying people in similar situations elsewhere, and every effort will be made to bring about the same success in his constituency.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, on Tuesday morning, staff at the University Marine Biological Station Millport in my constituency were given the kind of early Christmas present no one wants. They were told the facility will close next year after the owners, University of London, decided not to invest in modernising the facility, despite £1.7 million already raised from other sources. This internationally renowned centre supports 40 local jobs on Cumbria, an Highlands and Islands enterprise already considers fragile, and if closure proceeds, specialist staff will be unable to find similar employment in Ayrshire, possibly Scotland, and will have to leave Cumbria, impacting hugely on the island economy. Can you advise as to what the Scottish Government can and will do to prevent this facility from being asset stripped of its vital research vessels and hyperbaric chamber, and whether ministers and agencies will work to develop a rescue package to ensure we retain this important educational facility?
First Minister.
I mean, it's an extremely difficult situation in what is a fragile island economy. As the member is aware, the station is owned by the University of London. It's not actually used by any Scottish university at the present, although the Scottish Funding Council does contribute some funding. There's also been funding has been offered to the University of London from a variety of sources. However, the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Lifelong Learning will happily broker meetings between the University of London and other interested parties to ensure that all potential options can now be explored. The Chamber, I know, just as in the previous example we're given, are well aware that what may seem in global terms a relatively small number of jobs to an island or a rural community can actually be massive in terms of the scope and impact on the economy. That's true of the situation in the south-west of Scotland, it's true of the situation in Millport, and the member can be assured that the Cabinet Secretary will explore every possible option to see what can be done to help the local community.
Question number 3. Sorry, Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Is the First Minister aware of the fears of staff in NHS Lothian who report tremendous pressure in beds at the ERI and Western General in what the Health Board describe as unprecedented demand? Will the First Minister ask his Health Secretary to engage with the reality of what's happening in our NHS, rather than issuing complacent reassurances?
First Minister.
Well, I don't think that corresponds to anything that the Health Secretary has said. The NHS Lothian Medical Director has reassured patients there are beds available across all hospital sites, and at no point will they have or will they have to stop admitting patients to hospital. As the member will be aware, there's a number of reasons for real pressure on beds at the present moment in terms of some of the illnesses which are widespread in the community at the present moment. But she can be assured that both government ministers and particularly the Health Board are concentrating on this to make sure that patient care is maintained at the highest possible standard.
Question number 3, Willie Rennie.
To ask the First Minister what issues will be discussed at the next meeting of the Cabinet.
First Minister.
Issues of importance to the people of Scotland.
Willie Rennie.
2 months ago, I asked the First Minister to extend nursery education for 2-year-olds. He said he would consider it. Now that he's had time, what decision has he reached?
First Minister.
Well, as Willie Rennie well knows, that there's a range of initiatives that have already been announced in terms of the overall ambit of getting it right for every child. The offer of 600 hours for 3- and 4-year-olds, the incentives that have been offered to family centres to expand their operations across Scotland, the incentive for family nurse partnerships, which apply to people younger than 2, in terms of the real difference that can make to some of the most challenged families in our community. So there's a range of measures which are there. The group, the all-party group indeed, which is meeting, is considering these matters. They'll come forward, as he knows, in legislation. But in terms of the emphasis that's been put on early years development, I don't think it can be seriously said that this government doesn't have a focus and a concentration, and there are substantial and important improvements being made to enhance the life chances of children of Scotland.
Willie Rennie.
I think all members would welcome what the First Minister says about extra provision. But in England, 40% of 2-year-olds will be getting 15 hours a week of nursery education. The future provision for 3- and 4-year-olds is good as well. And Professor James Heckman, who the First Minister will know is clear, he says the investment before the age of 3 gets the best return. So will he actually commit today, or at least give an indication today, that he's prepared to consider what's happening with the extra provision, the 40% of 2-year-olds? Because that could be transformational. It could help disadvantaged children get a good start in life. So can I press him again? Members from all parties agree with this, including his own. Will he take this important step today?
First Minister.
Can I say 2 things in seriousness to Willie Rennie? I mean, firstly, he's aware that the 600-hour commitment is much greater than is being allocated in England for 3- and 4-year-olds. I mean, that's true. I don't think he should disregard the importance of family centres and family nurse partnership in providing the targeted support. The task force that is working on this is working extremely hard to bring about the best possible position for young people in Scotland. But I could cite the whole variety of sources from English local authorities who are seriously questioning whether aspects of what is said to be an offer in England can actually be delivered, given the resource position. Well, given the resource position that they face, there's a whole range of English local authority leaders and other experts who are seriously doubting that. And therefore, I think we can be confident that what has been announced in Scotland to date, the 600-hour commitment for 3- and 4-year-olds, the expansion of family partnerships, the expansion of family nurse partnerships and family centres, these things are actually going to be delivered. The all-party group which is meeting on this keeps the matter under continuing review. The focus of that is going to be very important in terms of government decision-making, as is in the statutory commitment to this. That package represents a substantial enhancement of provision in Scotland and is fully in line with a shift to early support and early intervention, which is the hallmark of this government, even in times of great financial stringency, which he will remember is being imposed by a government of which...
Order.
Well, I know the alliance and the referendum, I didn't know it extended to actually not thinking we're in a period of financial stringency imposed by a Tory Liberal government in Westminster. I think that is a reality for this year and of next year. So just bear in mind that the efforts that have been made in Scotland are very substantial indeed, and that sincere commitment will improve and enhance the life chances of our younger people in Scotland, including those who are most at risk.
Question number 4, Roderick Campbell.
To ask the First Minister what discussions the Scottish Government has had with the UK Government regarding the Scottish Government's submission to the EU on minimum pricing for alcohol.
First Minister.
Well, there's been regular contact with the UK Government on minimum pricing. The Cabinet Secretary for Health, Farrell Neil, will be meeting with the UK Government's Minister of State, Jeremy Brown MP, early in the new year to discuss the matter further. In framing a reply to the European Commission, we continue to engage within and out with Scotland with those who agree that minimum unit pricing should form a key part of the response to alcohol misuse.
Roderick Campbell.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. The UK Government has shown its willingness to support this measure, and it's launched its own consultation into minimum pricing, showing that once again where Scotland leads, the rest of the UK follows. Can he give an assurance that this Government will continue to promote the public health argument on pricing based upon Article 36 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union?
First Minister.
Yes, I can, and it is worth noting that elsewhere in Europe the public health benefits of minimum pricing, which is now supported substantially across this chamber, are being recognised. Just last week, the Irish Government's Minister for Health, Dr James Riley, said, quote, "I wish to express my full support for the Scottish proposals on minimum unit pricing of alcohol. This is an important policy measure to reduce the harmful consumption of alcohol, and in this regard, the Irish Department of Health is currently preparing proposals for similar legislation in Ireland." That is obviously of importance to have that degree of international support at any time, but particularly important when, as at the 1st of January, Ireland chairs the European Council.
Question 5, Elaine Murray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's position is on Shelter Scotland's claim that 1 in 4 people believe that they are one paycheck away from losing their homes.
First Minister.
Shelter's new research highlights how unemployment puts families at greater risk of repossession, eviction and homelessness. This Government remains focused on economic growth in order to protect and create jobs and avoid families being placed in this position in the first place. I was thus pleased by the drop in unemployment in the latest quarter in Scotland. But importantly, in terms of housing and housing legislation, from the 31st of December, all those in Scotland who are assessed as unintentionally homeless by local authorities will be entitled to settled accommodation. In addition, Scotland has the strongest legislative protection anywhere across these islands for those at risk of repossession.
Elaine Murray.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. Many of those families will spend a period of time in temporary accommodation before being able to be housed, and Shelter have also highlighted that 5,300 homeless children will wake up in temporary housing on Christmas Day because their family has no home to call their own. What consideration will your Government give to introducing national guaranteed standards for temporary accommodation for homeless families with children?
First Minister.
Well, we give all measures serious consideration, including that one. But can I say I delivered the Eddie Morgan lecture organised by Shelter a few weeks ago, and there was huge support for the legislative improvement in terms of homelessness, and of course a recognition of the sharp fall in homelessness applications since 2005-06, where they've fallen from over 60,000 to over 45,000 in 2011-12. Now that represents substantial progress, as does the legislative framework that gives all unintentionally homeless people equal rights before the law. And so while there are challenges still to overcome and while all good suggestions will be properly considered, I think the Chamber, as Shelter is, should be proud of the legislative framework that this Parliament has put into place. And also note that as homelessness in terms of these statistics is falling in Scotland, it's rising elsewhere in these islands.
Number 6, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. The First Minister, what action is being taken to minimise disruption from industrial action over the festive season?
First Minister.
I think this is maybe one of these questions which seemed like a good idea on Monday.
Murdo Fraser.
Can I thank the First Minister for his response. If a week is a long time in politics, Presiding Officer, the 3 days since I lodged this question on Monday have proved a very long time in industrial relations. So, will the First Minister join with me in welcoming the resolution of the industrial dispute between ScotRail and the RMT? And in the spirit of the season, will he join with me in wishing all travellers and those working for them in the sector a safe journey and a very happy Christmas?
First Minister.
It's worth reflecting on the RMT and ScotRail dispute settled, the RMT and cross-country trains settled, the United First Aberdeen is settled, the BMA hospital doctors is settled, the RMT and Serco over the Northlink ferries, the strike has been suspended. All of that is welcome news. Unfortunately, I've got to report that the London tube strike, apparently in Boxing Day, is still going ahead. Which is very disappointing, given that even the trams in Edinburgh were running yesterday. But I know that just as the advent of Murdo Fraser's question clearly focused minds in Scotland, in advance of him asking it to come to a satisfactory conclusion, and I'm quite certain if he puts the same mind and advice to Boris Johnson down in London, that perhaps they'll get a result there as well.
That ends First Minister's question. We now move to members' business. Members who are not taking part should leave the chamber as quickly and quietly as possible.